Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Golan. I am Executive Director of the Society for Humanistic Judaism. Thanks so much for being here. This is I've lost count already, 14th or 15th episode of our Life, the Universe, and Humanistic Judaism Rabbi Encounter series. This is for members of the Society for Humanistic Judaism, whether you are an independent member directly with the society, or you're a member of one of our affiliated communities, or a donor or supporter. We very much appreciate you and the support you give to our global, really, movement. We've got folks from, I saw at least 3 different countries joining this. So thank you very much. We do make these available to the entire public on YouTube afterwards, but this is one of the few things we reserve as a benefit of membership. Most of our materials and resources are available to everyone because we want everyone to benefit if they can without there being a barrier of finance. But for those who are able to be a member and are able to support us, we very much appreciate it and need it. We are a nonprofit organization, and so long as we are allowed to continue to be a nonprofit organization, we will be one. So today I'm very excited to welcome Rabbi Mary Beth Raskin, who many of you may recall is the most recent reigning recipient of the Sherwin T. Wine Lifetime Achievement Award. Mary discovered humanistic Judaism at Oceania congregation while living in Toronto on a work assignment. Upon returning to Portland, Oregon, she became involved as a volunteer leader in Kol Shalom Community for Humanistic Judaism. Mary then applied to the leadership program of the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, and after certification, went on to complete the rabbinic program and received ordination in 2023. During that time, Mary expanded her leadership role in the Humanistic Judaism movement, serving as board president of the Society for Humanistic Judaism for 4 years, leading with grace and dignity, and was a wonderful boss. Mary recently established a cultural synagogue in Portland, and I'm happy to turn it over to you, Mary.
Great. Thank you. Hello to everyone. It's fun. I see some faces from my Talmud class, which is really fun. So I'm really happy we have that program for SHJ, and people from my community. So, and all of you from my community that are all over the place. So first, Chag Sameach, happy Passover. It's appropriate my talk falls during Passover because doing Passover, however you do it, is related to my talk. But first, I want to share a story about SHJ that's also relevant to my talk today. I haven't had a chance to see all your faces, but this is a story from by reaching out to the Jewish secular community of Asheville. So if there's anyone here from that community, this is about your community. So here's the story. The mother of a member of my community is having some health issues. When I learned that her mother lived in Asheville, North Carolina, I wrote to the email address listed at the SHJ website. I received a response immediately, and it was heartwarming to receive a personal response from an SHJ member community with whom I've had no previous experience. It was the best of what our SHJ member communities can provide for each other. So in our back and forth conversation by email, I learned about their community, and I'm inspired by some of the things that they're doing. As of today, the chair of their caring committee is in contact with the member of my community. And I don't know if they'll be able to help my member's mother directly, but I can tell you that my community member and I both feel less alone. In this chaotic world, we know there are people who care and will respond. So my talk today is called Time and the Meaning of Life, a path started by the ancients. This is a talk about the biblical creation story and a quote that I find inspiring. Before I get started, I have a short explanation about my relationship to the Hebrew Bible. As a child, in my conservative synagogue confirmation class, I got a D in Bible study. Later, as a college student, I received a lower than normal grade the term we studied Bible in my Hebrew language class, a class I want you to know that was taught by my childhood rabbi. Little embarrassing. Multiple attempts to read the Bible after that made me think that it was dry and unreadable. My relationship with the Bible began to change during my rabbinic studies. Learning about humanistic Judaism and approaching the Bible as literature rather than God's word was completely and profoundly changing my relationship. So now I explore the text randomly. This is not an academic approach. When something sparks my imagination, I read for the plain meaning and then let the text percolate. Excuse me. What is the plain meaning? Who are the characters and what is their role? Why did the ancient authors include the text? What could it mean to them? Can it mean anything to me in my contemporary life? Or is it simply interesting with no further meaning? Recently, I've been thinking about the first creation story. As a reminder, there are two creation stories. The first is found in Genesis 1 to chapter 2. In this story, the descriptions are austere, the creations are balanced, and they emphasize the work of Elohim. The second story follows the first. This story is human-centered, describing the creation of Adam and Eve, their life in the Garden of Eden, and their interaction with the God Yahweh. So, why are creation stories important? Mythic creation stories tell us about a people's culture. A creation story is the foundational story of that culture. For us, the biblical creation stories are foundational to our Jewish culture. My talk today explores the potential meaning of the first creation story as a mythic tale for the creation of time. This is the time part of my title. The meaning of life part of my talk comes from a quote that I have posted on the wall above my computer. The quote is by Hilda Bernstein, an author and artist who was born in Great Britain and moved to South Africa with her husband and children in 1963. There, she was an activist against apartheid and for women's rights. The quote is from an interview in the Washington Post. So here's the quote. "The meaning of life is not a fact to be discovered, but a choice that you make about the way you live." Like Helen Bernstein, we are living in stressful and changing times. Everyone is thinking about it in one way or another. Along with this thinking about it, we're thinking about how to respond. What do we do? And doing means making decisions about our life, our time. I will share some of the questions I'm considering about how to respond to these chaotic times. And I'd love to hear your questions and potential answers to how you're responding. So feel free to put them in the chat or wait until later. And Paul, I thank you in advance for your help on this. Okay. I propose that the idea of time and the idea of life as meaning are related. My underlying assumption is that what we do with our time is what gives our lives meaning. I believe that not only would the ancients agree with this interpretation, but that they wrote a whole book on how to do it. Further, I believe that the relationship of time and the meaning of life was constructed by the ancient biblical authors in their very first story. My focus is on the first creation story. Why? Well, I have two reasons. One is that it is the first story, and therefore I see it as the primary story. The second reason is that it is a story about the creation of time and action or doing. I love it that the first biblical story begins with the word Bereshit, in the beginning. The word itself invites us to sit back, listen to the story of our beginnings. So let us begin. The story begins when the only thing that existed was darkness, swirling wind, and water. The first thing that was created was light. And it's important to know that the created light was in addition to the darkness. Creating light in addition to darkness was the creation of the first day. Time had been created. Following the first day are the creation of land and sea, heaven and earth, plants and animals, including people, to populate this new universe. It took 6 days to complete this creation. On the seventh day, Elohim ceased creating and rested. This day was called Shabbat from the Hebrew word Sheva, meaning 7. We now have a week. Everything in the world and time itself had been created. What are we to make of this story? Why is it important? I believe the purpose of this story is to give structure and meaning to our lives. In this story, the ancients saw the world, the universe, as one of chaos. The ancients created a God that tamed the chaos by creating light or time, followed by all that we see in the world. The ancients gave structure to the chaos of the world by creating time without chaos. In this one story, the ancients explained how the world we see came about, but also how to live in this world. The idea that Elohim worked for 6 days, then rested, and that we should follow that model is so powerful that the entire world today operates on a 7-day week. What is important to me is this premise of structuring time. The ancients understood that taking control of our time gave us power in a chaotic world. This is their message in their very first story. It is this power to control time, to make decisions about our time, that gives our lives meaning. Chaos or darkness is followed by order or light, which provides vision. In Judaism, all of our important days begin in the evening of darkness and chaos so that we may end our day with light or vision and order. The seventh day, Shabbat, or the day of rest, is our most important time. Whatever we choose to do on Shabbat, no matter how little, no matter how much, Shabbat is a part of our consciousness as Jews. The ancients commanded that every 7 days we stop the chaos of creating and enter the light of rest and reflection. The ancients gave us other instructions on what to do with our time. So actually, they gave us many, many instructions, but what I'm going to mention next are based on the natural world. So the ancients couldn't control the natural world, but they could pay homage to it. They created rituals or holidays to honor and recognize the natural world. The early Hebrews were a nomadic people traveling in the hills and deserts. They were guided by the moon and the stars. So the 7-day week, inspired by the Babylonians, was coordinated with the 21-day cycle of the moon to create a month. When the Israelites were a settled and agricultural people, the sun and its seasons became important markers of time. This was so important that the ancient biblical writers prescribed when the seasonal agricultural holidays must begin. So early in Exodus, they write, 3 times a year you shall hold a festival. And these are all based on seasonal harvest. So the first in the spring is the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which we're celebrating now. The next one is the Feast of Harvest, the first fruits of your work, and that Shavuot or Pentecost, which will be in 7 weeks. And then last, the Feast of the Ingathering, the final harvest of the year, when you gather in the results of your work of the field. So Sukkot. We are here today during Passover. Our observances of Passover give structure to our time. We are honoring, perhaps recognizing the message of the first creation story. Actively structuring our time gives us power in a chaotic world. What we actually do with our time, such as the Passover Seder, is meaningful. I've come to realize that understanding and accepting this power is only a first step. The ancient commandments to honor Shabbat and the harvest holidays are instructions from the ancient biblical writers. They are powerful and meaningful instructions, which is why we continue to honor them. At the same time, our lived world has its own chaos. Routines, habits, and rituals that were once predictable are no longer predictable. COVID, social media, and new technologies, including Zoom, which I greatly appreciate, have changed or eliminated former routines, habits, or rituals for all of us. Shifting political movements are creating their own chaos. What I take from the creation story is the idea that taking control of my time gives me power over chaos. What I take from Hilda Bernstein's quote is that what I do with my time can give my life meaning. There's another message we get from the ancients that's related to what we do with our time. The holiday commandments were directed at the community. So the three harvest holidays I mentioned, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, were also pilgrimage holidays. They were communal celebrations of the highest order. As I consider how to respond to the chaos of the moment, I find that participating in or for a community is the most meaningful way for me to live. And that's why the response from the Jewish secular community of Asheville was so important to me. And I think this was similar for Hilda Bernstein. Her activist in her South African community was the most meaningful way for her to live. So here are the questions I have now for myself. What do I want to do with my time? What is the priority of the things I'll turn my attention to? How can I improve what's already meaningful? And how can I create new meaningful action? I'd like to open the conversation up to you. What questions are you asking? What answers are you doing? What provides meaning in your life? And how are you responding to chaos? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. It really was meaningful for me, and I appreciate that perspective. I especially liked the idea of control of time gives me power over chaos, which I wish I could feel more often than I do. I often feel like I'm powerless in relation to time. So this is, you know, it's a something I think about almost daily, but not in those words. So this was really helpful to see. And I will say personally, my stepbrother who grew up very secularly Jewish is now Orthodox, and I've never had a theological conversation about what he actually believes. But my sense, just from looking in from the outside, is the structure of his day is something that he was longing for, having grown up with complete freedom. And it's almost like that freedom, which I would absolutely feel is essential to me, um, was so unstructured and chaotic, right? And that's why that word chaos really struck me, that he now knows what he has to do almost every minute of the day. And I think that that is a huge comfort for him. It wouldn't work for me necessarily, but it's something that I think is very powerful for him, and that I'm jealous of in some ways, but I'm not willing to take up that approach necessarily, because what he's doing with his time is theistic ritual. But I can see why it's so powerful to think about, and particularly among the ancients, where so much of it was tied in with what you had to do, right? The pilgrimage that you mentioned related to agriculture, which you had to do to survive, most people. So I think the challenge today is for a lot of people is structure. So I don't really have a question for you other than how do you do it? Was there is there anything in there about how to actually do it?
Is that a question for me, how to do it?
Yeah. Tell me how to
Well,
structure my time.
wow, I don't think you actually want me to answer that question for you.
I do, and so I'd love for folks to also weigh in on it, but it is something I think about a lot, which is time and using it meaningfully. And there are all kinds of things out there in the universe. I think of this grid, which I've seen attributed to Eisenhower, General Eisenhower, I think before he was President Eisenhower, as far as creating a grid of what is urgent versus what is important and how you differentiate between the two. And in this day of emails and so on, where you get a notification and it feels urgent and immediate, and having to decide, is this actually important, or am I going to spend my time working on the important or clearing off the urgent? Obviously urgent and important is the top priority, but urgent and not important is not, and it's hard sometimes to set those things aside.
Okay, I do have a response to you. And it's something I said, but while you were talking, I remembered a quote, which I can't give to you guys exactly because I don't have it in front of me. Uh, but it's by, just a second, I just lost it. I'll have to look it up. But here's the quote has to do with the how to make decisions. And the quote is, when things are, I think it was by Freud, but I'll have to look that up here. When you have things of lesser important decisions you have to make, you use your mind. You think about it, you consider the consequences, and you kind of, you make your list of pro and con, et cetera. But for things that are very, very important, you make the decision with your heart. And I think that's what the idea of the week at the Shabbat is about. You've had all these days of chaos and creating and thinking and doing, and then you have to take a day where you rest and reflect. And it's in that day of resting and reflection that you can put some order into whatever your week has been. So I think from the from the biblical creation story, what I take from it is, maybe we need a little bit of that Shabbat time every day. Maybe not every week. Maybe one day a week is like not all that useful. But the idea of it is that you can live in chaos and you can respond to it and you can work with it. But every so often you have to take a rest from it. And I think that's the answer to your question.
Thank you. Do folks want to jump in? Do you want to put your hand up either where I can see it or use the tool, the react button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand? Go ahead, Miriam.
Mary, thank you. I wrote in the chat how I always appreciate your precision and clarity in presentation. And this was no different than typical of the way you find a core idea and then add to it and then come back to it. It's really stunning. It's actually one way that you can use to make decisions about time. So you're very well suited for it. I find that my struggle is a personal one, which I can't necessarily create a structure for, and that is doing what's best for me and doing what's best for others. And this is a self-care idea, but it's not just a simple decision. It's so intensely complex in terms of all the responsibilities that we feel towards the people that we love and care about, our work, and a million other things. And I've worked very hard to find a way to do that, always realizing that it's going to continue to be a struggle. So that's helpful to me. And I wonder how others might feel about acknowledging that it's not a simple process. There is no easy answer. And that because we live in such complexity, it's the way we have to live and find ways to give ourselves joy and peace. And, I have this thing, Sunday is almost always my Shabbat. And, it's television and listening to my books. And I'm pretty determined to keep that. So I hope it's helpful for others. I'd like to hear what others have to say.
Yeah, just make a short comment. This is the complexity and the confusion and the difficulties is why I use the word chaos, because chaos is a powerful word. And I think whatever we look like, I think all of us look like we go through our days and we've got everything under control, and inside we know we don't. That we're struggling like everyone else. But that is why I use the word chaos, because I agree with you. Life is very complex.
Sheila.
So
I find that this subject of time is very interesting because obviously time controls everything that we do. And it's our choice as to how we use that time. And talking about the Shabbat and the day of rest and reflection, I personally am a person who makes lists. I list what I have to do during the week, and I follow that pattern of what I have written down. I think that in order not to have chaos in one's life, you have to have some form of pattern. And it's very comforting to know that you have a plan. Whether you deviate from it occasionally or not doesn't matter. But the basic plan is something that is important, I think, as you go through the day, the week, and your life. And that's what I have to say.
I also use that plan to manage my chaos. I have a color-coded to-do list for every week. So, yeah, I understand.
Eva.
Good to see you again, Mary, and everybody else. Both as a neurotic organizer and a psychologist and a rabbi, I think that it's very important to put together what you brought up in terms of time. And reality is the combining of space and time. So I find that if you organize your space, if the space around you is neat and not chaotic, it's much easier to function and not to get so worked up and to feel a lot more rested. So that's one of my ways to do it. But with the chaos of the political world around us, where we cannot control it, there's a whole different ball game of how do you keep yourself in control, knowing that you cannot control the outside world. How do I stay calm when I know how crazy Trump is? How do I stay calm when it looks like we could have another world war? So if any of you, other than Miriam's advice of watching movies where you know exactly, how it's going to end, it's terrific. It's a wonderful way to relax and to stay calm. But other than that, if any of you have suggestions as to how do you stay calm when it comes to things that you know you absolutely cannot control, I would love to hear it.
That is the question, right?
Jody?
Mary, thank you. I think that your presentation being in such calm tones is very reassuring and very helpful. So I thank you for that. One of the maxims that I use is that equilibrium will return. And so when it feels that teeter-totter is just way too much to one side, you know that it's going to shift back. And that kind of approach, I think, is very helpful. That when things really feel like they're swirling out of control, I know that equilibrium is going to return and they're going to be more balanced and more in control. I find that another expression that I use with my congregation is that doing good makes you feel good. And I know this from personal experience that in the depths of, great sorrow, that getting out and connecting with the world when it might feel very chaotic in my own personal space, it makes you feel better. It shows you there's something bigger than yourself, and your own personal chaos will still be there. But doing good makes you feel good. And so I think that if you sort of have a few maxims in your life, a few axioms that you can live by and try and make them apply, I find that to be very helpful. I would also say to my rabbinic colleagues that are on this call, I think we all know that no 2 days of ours are the same. And I think that the positions that we hold and the holding on to things for our members and our communities can sometimes feel as if it increases our own personal chaos, because we don't get up and go to work and the same thing's going to happen and we clock out and that's that. We work weekends, we work when other people are not working. That's sort of the nature of the job. And that's not a complaint. That's just a fact. And I think that if we stop fighting certain things and accept them, that will also be helpful. And by the way, to Sheila, I also am a list maker. I have a hard copy calendar. I have a dry erase calendar, and I started writing a separate list, filling in the details as to what goes on there. And when my kids were little, everybody had a different color on the dry erase calendar. And if there was an empty square, it didn't matter if it was a Tuesday, I called that Shabbat.
I think what you said, Rabbi Kornfeld, at the beginning about equilibrium is something that I wanted to share. And that is that the ultimate test of how we live our lives is how we balance things. And if you find if you want to turn to a biblical selection, Ecclesiastes, where it says there's a time for this and a time for that. And to achieve balance in our lives and in our work, and not be totally on the side of making everything joyful and ignoring the difficult, but seeing where there has to be, as you said, equilibrium. That's a real challenge. And I hate to quote the Talmudic sage, but the great thing in the Mishnah: if I am not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And that's achieving the balance between the two. That's the ultimate, I think, great lesson of Judaism. Anyhow.
Thank you. Bruce, you have your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted, and again, I'm not sure how many people might be familiar with Musar study and practice in Judaism, but for me, one of the key things about my experience with time is intentionality. How do I direct my intentionality? And the degree to which my intentionality focuses on the efficient use of my mental energy and how effective I can be in terms of adhering to my values. I know that kind of reaching, my late teens and 20s in the 1960s in the humanistic psychology and counter movement, I really developed an interest in integrating writing in a journal and finding out what it actually meant to be a mensch. And that has really been a 50+ year project in terms of writing. But then 5 years ago, I discovered Musar practice. I discovered 1100 years ago, or written about 1100 years ago by a number of Jewish philosophers. And what it's allowed me to do is to focus every week on a different character trait through journaling and paying attention and gaining feedback from people. Traits such as generosity and equanimity and gratitude and loving kindness towards myself and others. And what I've tried to do is maintain that practice. And that practice allows me to ride my surfboard on the chaos. And I don't have any expectations that the chaos will disappear. There has always been chaos and it just changes in my life. But I find that by having an intentional practice to maximize my goodness as a person, and I find that for me, it's best to start with myself, because trying to improve the world is overwhelming and demoralizing. But if I can improve myself and my interactions with people, I at least feel empowered at that level.
Yeah, I think you make a really important point about what you're doing for you, because ultimately we have control over ourselves and our time. And I agree with you. I think whatever we do for or with others, that it all has to start with us. That it's part of being an individual human. You know, we all have our own chaos, and sometimes we get to connect with others and maybe share in that chaos, but also share in the relief that we can find with whatever we choose to do. Yeah.
The word intentionality really resonated with me as well, because it's something else I think a lot about, which is, you know, to me, it is related to being present in the moment too, which I find to be seems to be harder. I don't know if I can prove that or not. And I also fear that it's harder for younger generations when there's so much um, happening instantaneously. Um, this is the most common movement that my children make as they flip through videos on their phone, and um, and then when I bring them to something where you have to sit and be present and listen, like a couple of Shabbats ago, we went to an event where there was a classical violin maestro who was amazing, but I was very aware of where I was mentally, and is this working? Can my kids even do that? I have enough of a hard time doing it. So when I think about time, and it's also related to presence, and can I be here at this moment? And one of the things I'm finding, like in my week, is, I have standing meetings throughout the week and I have to be present for it. And then when I'm on my own, I'm thinking in 100 different directions. But then when I get together with people, even if it's online, I have to be in a space. Or if I'm doing personal training where I've made an appointment to be at the gym at a certain time, I have to go. I made the appointment and I'm locked in for 15 minutes and I can't escape because I paid for it. Not I can physically leave if I want to, but because I paid for it, there's this whole nice tie-in of feeling guilty that I don't want to waste the money, so I actually go. And it's great. It's when I'm going there, I'm thinking about literally 100 different things, and then once I'm there, I have no choice. And that's like the structure piece I was talking about before with my stepbrother that I feel somewhat jealous about, I feel like for him, he's locked into that so much more every day than I am, and the unstructured time, which I would claim to want to have more of, is actually like the bigger challenge for me because my mind is everywhere. Gabrielle.
Yep. I, uh, as someone who almost 60 years old, and I recently realized I have some form of ADD and a lot of time blindness. And uh, what you were both Mary and Paul saying about time as taming chaos, uh, or ordering, putting order in time is putting order in chaos. And when Paul was talking about his brother, yeah, when I was young, I very much wanted to live in a kibbutz, and then when that didn't come about, I thought of, being in some sort of convent or temple, Buddhist or whatever, just because I had experienced, the in retreats when someone else was ordering my time, I didn't, I felt comfortable. I didn't have troubles like troubles of being an adult in modern society, and now with all the inputs that we have from technology and so on, I feel I have more books than ever waiting for me to be read. Um, but also many things for me just to be lived in order. You know, order in your space. Okay, uh, you need. Uh, in my case, I need a scaffolding, external structure. I'm still uh, kind of like struggling with it. But now at least I can. I don't. I don't. I don't beat myself over it. But I know where I have to head. But I guess, yeah, sometimes we need external systems of accountability. That might be an accountability group, or uh, uh, you know, making commitments to paying subscriptions to different things, uh, and try not to lose that money or whatever. But it was a very you made me think a lot about what I want to do. That was it. But I really appreciate the discussion and the struggles that we share, from the OCD through to the ADD. We all have some, as Christians say, we all carry some sort of cross. We all have our own chaos to tame.
Uh, Thank you, Gabrielle. So you're bringing up something that you're experiencing personally. As you were talking, and Paul, as you were talking also, there's articles and books now out that I've read reviews on, that what's going on with our social media, our phones, whatever we're doing on our phones, whether it's emails or Instagram or TikTok or whatever it is, it's being developed to capture our brains. So there's science behind what these companies are doing to grab our attention. And it makes it harder to make it let's say, a practical, intentional decision when this media that we use, and I love my cell phone, it's my handheld computer. It's with me all the time. I learn from it. I communicate. At the same time, everything about it, the companies that are developing whatever apps they have, they know our brain. They scientifically, they know how our brains respond, how our eyes respond, and we're not always conscious of that. And it's very difficult So I don't want to in any way minimize the difficulty that we all have. And in this case, with with the technology that we all are using and experiencing, it's very difficult. And that's why I keep going back to the word chaos, because for me, the word chaos is it's about what's unformed and unexpected and unknown. And I work as hard as everybody to kind of keep it at bay, or to have some light and vision and reflection also. But yeah, and I appreciate what some of you have called out, the balance, and that's what we strive for, right? We're striving for that balance. So anyway, thank you for your comment.
Other thoughts? Steve,
Yeah,
nice
so
to see you.
just yeah, um, just something my parents used to tell me, which is in the way of balance and dealing with chaos is I think there may be and there are psychologists and psychiatrists on the call. There is, I think, a human phenomenon where the joke was 95% of what you fear will not happen, and 95% of what you hope for will not happen, which can be depressing and but also a relief. And that's just so that that's a notion that helps me calm down when I'm very excited about things. I realize, that there's a human tendency to get overly worried or excited about things, and especially when you're worried, it's comforting to know that probably in the arc of history things will not be as bad as you were fear. So I just thought I'd add that.
Thank you. Peter has his hand up.
Hi. I was just wondering, with all the discussion of how chaos can be a problem, any thoughts about how chaos can be beneficial, which would indicate quick decisions or getting things done and clearing out all the things that are nagging you and just removing them? So, is there anything good about chaos? Question mark end.
That's a great question. I would love to hear other people comment on it. I'm looking at the good part as being the break from chaos, the rest, and I mean, I suppose, okay, this is just my first thought about it. The good part of the chaos, and going back to our biblical story, is that's the creation. There was chaos where there was, swirling wind, water, and then light. But during the chaos of the week, that was all about creation. And so if there's any good to the chaos, ideally it would be creation. So that's my first thought.
Sherry, did you have your hand up? No? Okay. Sheila?
I think that chaos can be a challenge. Chaos may not be something negative. It can be a challenge for us to rise to and to prove ourselves in a way that perhaps we hadn't thought about before. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. And actually, it makes me think, to push back a little on Eva Goldfinger's point, I think I've seen articles like why geniuses have messy deaths. Have you ever seen those? So maybe chaos helps create new ideas or creativity also. You should see my kid's room, okay? I'm trying to find some positive spin on it. Yeah. Larry?
Well, I think the idea I've run into in the past is that the opposite of chaos would be too much structure, and that too much structure becomes oppressive. and eliminates choices. That at some level we want freedom from choice, so we don't have to struggle over what to do when, but finding a middle ground where there's not too much structure so that you can be creative and you can be spontaneous and you can face up to choices that you may have reluctance to face.
Yeah, well, I'm liking this idea of chaos being creativity. And so thank you for bringing that up. Everything that everyone here is saying is what I find so wonderful about our community and the conversations that we have. It's so great to have all these different perspectives and learn from them. So I've gotten a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Eva?
So somebody asked for the definition of chaos, and there are many definitions, but one of them is the lack of distinction between. So the lack of distinction between things. And so I agree with Sheila that the benefit of chaos is when you don't see the distinction between things, then you get your energy and your mind going and you begin to wonder, okay, so how can I fix this? What can I do? Literally, chaos is, in my opinion, an energizer. It can also take away your energy, but it's also an energizer because it gets your brain going as to how you can use your energy to fix the chaos, to organize things, to make it better, to make a distinction between A and B and all the things that are called bow, as they say in Hebrew. Everything is in it. You cannot distinguish one thing from another. So we need to be able to learn how to distinguish it, and that's creativity, as Larry had pointed out. So yeah, I'm agreeing with all of the things that you're saying.
Fantastic. Leave you?
Yeah. Now that you mentioned that idea of distinction, I remember an interpretation of Genesis in which the idea was not necessarily that the creation started by creating things, but rather by distinguishing. You distinguish the darkness from the light, therefore you have light. Or you distinguish the sun from light, and then you have the sun, and so on. So everything is created by finding the difference between things. And that was the way of creating order. Also naming them.
Thank you. Any last thoughts before we let you all go on your way?
Well, I have one last thought.
Go ahead.
Besides my thank you, because all of you are giving me new ways to think about this. So I was thinking about the original chaos before light, before day was, light was created and day. There's a different kind of chaos between the first day and Shabbat. So before the first day, it was swirling chaos, no bounding, no energizing. It was, I mean, in a way, it was fearful. And yet we had the first day, and from the first day to the last day of the week, the chaos was all about creating. And all of us, we know that how tired we can get from working and creating, and that we need that seventh day, whenever or however we do it, to rest. So it's, I'm appreciating the story even more. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Mary. This was excellent. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are back next month. You will get notified if you're here. It means you're on the registrant list, but keep checking for our emails about what the next topic will be. Again, Mary, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. And now I'm going to go back to my chaos. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.